We're looking forward to what we hope will be an informative, engaging, and inspiring gathering to talk about how NICA is impacting the future of our student athletes, our communities, our families, cycling, and youth development. But before we begin, please join me in thanking Trek Bikes and Lifetime for sponsoring this event. Their generous support has enabled us to be together today, and we're grateful for that. So thank you, Trek, and thank you, Lifetime. I also want to offer a special thanks to our guest speakers, John Burke, Kristen Dieffenbach, and Lou Bergholz. We are deeply appreciative of their time and their commitment to NICA, and we're looking forward to having them share their valuable perspectives and insights with us today. After we hear from our guests, we'll hear from Steve Matous. He'll offer his closing remarks. And last, but certainly not least, thanks to all of you. If you're with us this morning, you've given your time, your energy, and your talents to NICA, and without you, we quite simply wouldn't exist. So as you might have guessed, this event was not quite what we had envisioned when we set about planning our 2020 annual national conference. This actually would have been our 10th annual conference, and we were going to hold it in Philadelphia this year, courtesy of the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Cycling League, affectionately known as PICKLE to the NICA community. I should note that PICKLE is one of our now 31 NICA leagues. Anyway, this multi-day event traditionally includes NICA national staff, our National Board of Directors, our league directors, coach supporters, coaches, and volunteers from around the country. There's a lot of learning, a lot of wisdom sharing and knowledge sharing, community building, fun, surprise, a little bit of bike riding is involved as well. And as you can see from the photo, there's a lot of wearing of the same shirts. But this year, COVID-19 threw us a bit of a curveball, and so we've pivoted, as we have in so many ways, to accomplish the spirit of our objectives in a safe but engaging way. The silver lining here is that we are able to invite more people into the conversation this year, and we're excited and intrigued by the possibility that this venue opens up for us. So that being said, what do we hope to accomplish here today? So for those of you who are new to NICA, we hope that you will walk away with a deeper understanding and appreciation of who we are and what we do. For those of you who have been part of the NICA community, our hope is that this conversation will offer you renewed confidence in our strength, our resilience, and our future. And for everyone here today, I hope that you will see what we clearly see, carrying out our mission, building stronger minds, stronger bodies, stronger character, and stronger communities through cycling is needed now more than ever. We believe that with every crisis comes opportunity. We all know that we're living in challenging and unprecedented times. Time and history will judge how we as individuals, community, and society rose to this occasion. And we're confident that with the energy, the passion, and the commitment that you all and the entire NICA community bring to our work, NICA will emerge from this crisis as more resilient, better in what we do, and even more relevant to the people and the communities that we serve. To do that, though, we also recognize that we must do a better job of including and reaching all of the people and the communities that can benefit from NICA. Recent events have brought that into stark focus for us. To be clear, NICA, like the cycling and outdoor sectors in general, has struggled, and we continue to struggle to reach communities of color. This has been a priority for us and will continue to be. Inclusivity and equity are two of our 5 core values. We adopted and we embrace those values because they are fundamental and critical to our purpose. We must do more across all of NICA, from our board of directors to our volunteers. And we're committed to doing just that, as you will hear from Steve shortly. One final note, although we won't have time to take everyone's questions, Steve will answer as many as he can from the audience at the close of his remarks. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit your questions for Steve throughout the broadcast, and he'll answer as many as possible before we adjourn. Thank you all for being here and for all that you do to get more kids on bikes.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. Hey, my name is Mike McGarry. I'm a coach licensing manager here for NICA National, and I'm going to be emceeing a little bit today. So again, thank you, Susan. First up for our speakers today, we've got John Burke, who is the president of Trek Bicycle Corporation. John began working in the warehouse of Trek Bicycles in 1984 and has held a variety of positions before becoming president of the company in 1997. Under John's leadership, Trek's become a global business and one of the world's most popular bicycle brands. John's regarded as one of America's leading cycling advocates. Both John and Trek Bicycles believe in NICA's mission, vision, and core values. Their support of the organization has helped us get more kids on bikes. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to John and Mark as they do our keynote for today.
Thank you very much, Mike. Greetings from Waterloo, Wisconsin. We thought we'd jump right in and share the view from John's chair, first of the pandemic.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank Susan. I want to thank everybody in the NICA community for having me today. NICA is one of my favorite programs, and I'm just honored to be with this awesome group today.
Very good. Let's talk about COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah, you know, these are crazy times. I've worked at Trek for 36 years. I've never seen anything like it. You know, when the world shut down right about March 10th, we thought it was just going to be a really rough time for the bicycle business, for people riding bikes. And, you know, all of a sudden we started to get word, you know, towards the end of March that people were actually riding bikes. People wanted to get outdoors. They wanted to, you know, get some exercise. They wanted to ride. And for some really weird reason, and I'll remember the day, it was April 12th, there was like a button. And this button out there said, bike boom. And somebody pushed the button. And they pushed the button not just in the US, but they pushed the button in Europe, in Asia, all over the world. And, you know, what we've seen through the pandemic is that it's created this amazing bike boom. And, you know, what we're seeing, there's more people than ever are on bikes, and we're seeing cities around the world, whether it's in places like Seattle, where they've closed down 21 prime miles to cars, and they've opened them up to bicycles and pedestrians, or places like Milan or Berlin, where they're just redoing cities, and more has been done in 3 months than have been done in, you know, 10 years. So, you know, this pandemic has been, you know, a horrible crisis. But for the bicycle I've always said is kind of a simple solution to some complicated problems. The bicycle, I think, is helping the world through the pandemic.
A key component of our mission statement is to get more people on bikes.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that? And then I'll ask you about some specific programs.
You know, one of the things, my father founded Trek in 1976, and he looms large in the history of the company. And you know, he didn't start out with a whole lot. And both he and my mom always believed that we're here to do something more than just build bikes or try and make a profit, that we should really use what we have to help other people. And, you know, I've always viewed one of Trek's purposes is to get more people on bikes, and that bikes really are a simple solution. When you take a look at the health crisis that this country has, when you take a look at congestion, and then, you know, one of the biggest things, I think the biggest issue that's going to dominate the world in the next 50 years is climate change. And the bicycle can't solve all those problems, but it's a simple solution where it can make a contribution to solving all three. And that's why at Trek, we really like to help get more people on bikes.
So we are using the bicycle company. Please talk about places for bikes.
This is an organization that we started and we help fund. It's part of People for Bikes. But, if you take a look, just like with anything else, you have certain organizations that are really good, some that need some help, and then you got some that just do an awesome job. And the same thing is for cities and people who ride bikes. And what we've done with Places for Bikes is we've developed a tool that can go through 600 cities in America, and it can rate how friendly is that city for bikes. And then you can put, state ratings, country ratings, and you can determine where are the great places to ride and where are the not so great places to ride. And then within each city, it can really pinpoint what needs to be improved in the city, where are the opportunities. So that is a program that we put a lot of time and effort and money behind. And we're also taking that over to Europe. So next year, for the first time, we'll start rating cities in Europe. And especially because of the pandemic and with climate change, city leaders and national leaders are more interested in the bicycle. And I think by using Places for Bikes, I think we're in a great position to make a big difference.
Please share what's happening with IMBA.
IMBA's been around for a long time, and they've made a great contribution for developing more mountain bike trails. And, we love to mountain bike. And, one of the transformations that Trek made, and I would say in Trek's history, there's been maybe 25 key moments, a fork in the road. And one of those forks in the road happened in, I think it was 2006. And I was talking to Joe V at the time, and Trek was doing well in mountain bikes, but we could do better. And so Joe and I are having this conversation, and Joe says, you know what? If we really want to be a great mountain bike company, we've got to build trails at Trek, because you have to drive an hour to get to the trails. And so right across the street, 15 of the best miles of mountain bike trails in the world are at Trek. And it proved the point. And now at lunchtime, you see hundreds of people riding to the trails to go mountain biking. And it just proved the point to me that if you build it, they will come. And if you really want mountain biking to take off as a sport, we need to have trails. And IMBA really helps to do that work. And they're helping to get trails closer to kids. And, we love the work that IMBA's doing.
Let's talk about NICA.
Yeah. To me, high school sports is a big deal. And, I wasn't the best student in school. My sister got a B, and it was the end of her life. And I got a B, and it was the highlight of my high school career. And the class I learned the most at in school was basketball. And I had a basketball coach, Eric Walter, and I learned more from coach than I learned from any other class I ever had. And I just take a look at NICA, and I've been to the NICA races, and I'm just blown away. And, what you see in terms of kids learning life lessons, what you see in bringing families together, what you see in people learning about competition, and what you see about, especially in this day and age, getting kids outside to enjoy this amazing environment that we have. I think NICA is amazing. I think it is a great organization, and just the whole idea of getting kids on bikes outside is something that everybody ought to support. And at Trek, I'm proud that we're huge supporters of NICA.
On June 9th, we announced 6 key initiatives at Trek.
Yeah.
And as was addressed earlier, there are opportunities within our sport, especially around diversity.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of those key initiatives and especially how they can apply here with NICA?
We saw the George Floyd murder on television, and we saw that play out, and just how horrific that was. And I think how the murder of George Floyd just really brought to America and to everybody just kind of a gut check as to, does everybody really have an equal opportunity? And we can talk about police brutality and that it exists, and thankfully that conversation is happening in America today, that legislation is winding its way through Congress and through city halls. But one of the things I think that's at the heart of the issue is there equal opportunity? And, you know, Susan talked about it earlier, but we, you know, we're involved in a white-dominated sport. And I don't think it's because that white people just like mountain biking and people of color don't. I think it's because people of color haven't had an opportunity. And a lot of that is based on economics and zip codes. And so we saw, you know, companies would put out statements of support and things like that. And we had a meeting at Trek, and, you know, one of the things we're known for is grinders. We get stuff done. And, you know, I sat in my office, and I'm a whiteboard guy, and I got my pens, and, you know, you get a bunch of people together and throw stuff up on the board. And the question of the day was, how can Trek really make a difference? And we went through the board, and we came up with 6, and I'll just talk about a couple. But one of the things we talked about was, how do we get more people of color in the sport? And we have a world-class program here at Trek Certified Service, and we also have training for retail. And we said, you know what, we're gonna give away 100 scholarships a year for the next 10 years to bring people of color, to bring minorities to Trek, to give them great training on how to become a mechanic or how to become a manager at retail. And there are great jobs available right now at retail, and we think that is going to help. And then we said, we have this program called Dream Bikes right now in 5 cities where we put a bike store in an underserved location to provide affordable bikes to minority populations. And that's been pretty successful. But we said, what if we put the full force of Trek behind Dream Bikes, and we said, we're going to take the Dream Bike sign down, and we're going to put the Trek sign up, and we're going to put the full force of Trek in an underserved community, and we're going to hire people, and we're going to provide great products. We're going to provide products that also hit the price point of consumers, and then we're in the community. Now you can talk about bike rodeos. Now you can talk about getting kids involved in NICA, because the bike shop is the heart and the soul of a community. So we said, as part of our plan, we're going to put 10 stores in the next 3 years in underserved communities. And then we're going to try and get to 50 stores in the next 10 years. That's our goal. I've always said, what gets measured gets done, and we're gonna take a swing at that. And I really believe that we can get this thing going. And I think one of the biggest keys is, we've said we're gonna go out and we're gonna sponsor 25 NICA teams in minority communities. And when you take a look at 25 teams, 10 kids, that's 250. I think that's not an end, that's a start. And I think it gets the ball rolling. We're going to learn a lot of lessons. I think it's also going to highlight how successful this can be. And I'm hoping that 10 years from now, we look back, we say, that program that Trek put together got the ball rolling, and other people jumped in, other teams were sponsored, and it made a huge difference. I think that we can help bring color to cycling for the good of everybody. But you can't just talk about it. You got to actually do something. And, you know, we're committed to doing something.
So we are a solutions company.
Yep.
You are a solutions person.
Yeah.
And there's a theme we always talk about at Trek about always learning.
Yep.
And specifically that leaders are readers.
Right.
So I have a few questions about reading.
Yeah. Okay.
The first one is about this book.
Yep. Okay. So this is a new book. It's called Presidential Playbook 2020. And I've been a little disappointed with the direction of our country. And so over the last 3 years, I've written a book on 16 nonpartisan solutions to save America. I actually thought about running for president because I'm really not very happy with a lot of things in the country, and because I don't think people ever have a plan. So I wrote a book. It's got 16 of our biggest problems. It lists all the facts, and then it talks about really simple solutions. If you want a copy of this book, all you need to do is send me an email. I will send you a hardcover copy of this book. It's great for kids. It's a super simple, easy read, and it's also great for adults. I gave away a book the last time I spoke at NICA, and that's what you get for listening to me today.
That's awesome. So in the spirit of leaders being readers, please talk about what you are reading now.
Yeah, I'm reading, there's a guy at Trek, Mark Hoggett, and he asked me about 5 days ago, he said, have you read The Infinite Game? I said, no, Mark, I haven't read that. He goes, dude, you need to read that book. And so I picked up the book and I read the first 2 pages and I came to the conclusion that he's right. And so I just wanted to finish up here by reading to you the start of The Infinite Game, because there's a lesson here. And I think it's a great lesson for NICA. And it starts like this. It says, a signpost stands at a fork in the road, pointing in one direction. The sign says victory. Pointing in another direction, the sign says fulfillment. We must pick a direction. Which one will we choose? If we choose the path to victory, the goal is to win. We will experience the thrill of competition, and we will rush towards the finish line. Crowds will gather to cheer for us. And then it's over. And everyone goes home, and maybe sometime we can do it again. If we choose the path to fulfillment, the journey will be long. There will be times in which we must watch our step. There will be times we can stop and enjoy the view. We keep going. We keep going. Crowds gather to join us on the journey. And when our lives are over, those who joined us on the path to fulfillment will keep going without us, and they will inspire others to join them too. And when I read that, I thought about Trek. And Trek has been a fulfillment company. And when I thought about this event this morning with NICA, I go, wow, this is NICA. NICA is a fulfillment organization. And we keep going, and NICA keeps going, and crowds are gathering, and the journey continues. And when your time with NICA is done, there will be more people, and this crowd continues to grow. And you guys are doing just some absolutely amazing work. And I just want to tell you, from everybody at Trek, thank you for doing what you do. We are so happy to be on that journey with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, John and Mark. That was great. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you for the continued support and the belief in what we're doing, our mission and vision and values. So thanks, John. All right. Again, Mike McGarry here to introduce our next speaker and to remind you that if you've got questions for Steve Matous, keep throwing those in the chat and throwing your role with NICA in there. All right. We've got Kristen Dieffenbach up next. Kristen is an associate professor of athletics coaching with West Virginia University, and she is the current president of the U.S. Center for Coaching Excellence. She's been working as a coach and coach educator for over 20 years. Kristen's also a coach supporter in the West Virginia Interscholastic Cycling League, so she knows NICA. Kristen's going to speak on supporting student athletes, coaches, and each other in the NICA community. Take it away, Kristen.
Awesome, thank you. Let me go ahead and pull my screen up. Hi, everyone, and it's really great to be here. I'm very appreciative to everyone for putting this together in an opportunity. I was very sad that I wouldn't get to see all of you in person as we all headed out to the event, but seeing you all here is pretty amazing. And I know many of you personally from some of the different interactions I've had over the years. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to maybe sharing with some thoughts and some ideas with you to help folks as they think about this space of supporting student athletes, our coaches, and each other within the NICA community, because I think it's such an important conversation. So as we move into this topic and as we sort of talk about these things, just sort of making sure that you, if for some reason you cannot see my slides properly, please let me know. But as we sort of take a look at these things and talk about them, here we go. I want to make sure I acknowledge first that while I have drawn heavily from Pinterest for my images, the slides themselves are coming from a mix of my experience. As Mike noted, I have been a coach for over 20 years. I'm also a coach educator and coach developer by job. Here at West Virginia University, we have a program in coaching education for undergrads and master's students, and for coach development for our doctoral students. And there's quite a bit of research and evidence in the particular space about how do we help support people as we think our way through some of these really important and really challenging topics. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge and talk about those things as we go through these things. And we consider our roles individually and collectively as we talk about returning to play, addressing the critical issues related to inclusion and diversity, and in particular, the very important Black Lives Matter movement that is forefront in the conversation right now and really needs to be addressed with a lot of clarity and a lot of listening. And then talking a little bit about building and supporting communities, because I think that's one of the things that NICA has going forward that is the absolute strongest. So hopefully we'll bring together some of the experiences that I've had, as well as the evidence from our fields of study as we go through. So as they say, let's keep calm and ride on. So as we begin to talk a little bit, I wanted to address, of course, the immediate impact. And this is one of those very unique situations where globally, and I work quite a bit globally with coaches and coach educators from around the world, this is something we're all sharing, and this is something that we're all experiencing. Some of these issues around isolation, the sense of loss of our seasons, of our community, of our connection with others, the fear of what's next, what happens next. Talking to my seniors, you know, the fear of I didn't get to say goodbye to everybody, and what if this means that I won't get a college scholarship, or all the different things that come up around this. The uncertainty of it all. I'm not sure what's coming next. We have no concrete answers about what's happening in so many other realms. Here at the university, we get a new reminder almost every day about some small tweak, and we just don't know. A lot of concerns about fitness. I'm doing some work with Mid-Am Hockey right now, part of USA Hockey family. And one of the big concerns from a lot of parents is my kids can't get enough activity right now, and how do we do this? And then, of course, there are financial concerns for many, many families as we look at the current and the ongoing issues that are happening here. And we can't really begin to address movement forward and solutions until we address where these things are, and more importantly, address the fact that everyone's going to be experiencing these differently, and perhaps at different times, as certainly California, New York, some other places have been hit harder and in a more immediate sense, Seattle, for example, and then other places like here in West Virginia or in some of the other states where it's been a little bit slower and the impact might take a little bit longer to be felt. We also want to be recognizing that kids are going to be processing this very, very differently. What may have at first seemed fun, all of a sudden becomes a little bit more real when it hits someone in their family, and just the way children process things or teenagers process things based on their immediate environment versus the global environment and their exposure. And so we want to be mindful of these things. I also want to highlight something that I have in the center here, that you can't be sad while riding a bicycle. I disagree with that. I think you can be sad while riding a bicycle. I think that riding a bicycle can help, and we can look for some of the ways for it to be possible for it to help. We know that from some very strong research that exercising is an amazing way to help with people handling loss and depression and some of the other mental health concerns that we have right now for people as a global society. And so don't be afraid to be sad while riding your bike. But as we saw a moment ago, let's just keep cycling on and using the bike. And I think John said it really, really well, this idea of the bicycle being an incredibly powerful tool. Which brings me to my next slide, taking a look at this absolutely amazing opportunity that sort of happened, the bike boom. If you saw the Week Junior magazine or many, many news reports, I pulled just a few of them. Philadelphia is saying 150% increase of bikes on the road, increase of bike sharing globally, and some of the percentages I've seen have been in the hundreds, 451% in some cities kind of thing. We also know that families are riding more and more, and there's an increase of kids on bikes. The New York Times is also reporting long waiting lists for getting bikes. And then another really interesting thing to pick up on something that John said is that the bike has played historically a role. The women's emancipation movement, for example, the bike has played an amazing role in helping at different times of stress, different times of growth, different times of unrest, in helping us move forward. Even within some of our World War experiences, the bicycle's played an amazing role that most people don't know about. And so the history of the bicycle is huge here. So one other thing I want to acknowledge with this bike boom that I think is important to at least acknowledge from a perspective of some of the power of things NICA can do is that there's also been an increase in bike-related injuries reported around the country. So given that our skills and the work that we do there, we'll come back to that. So as we start to take a look at some of these things and move through, I wanted to acknowledge that as we are emerging, there is an opportunity larger than the bike community itself called Build Back Better. It's actually a term that's been around for a number of years that has been used by the United Nations and others to talk about how do we respond globally and how can we use crisis situations to pause and reflect and then grow and evolve. And I think this is a really great opportunity for everyone involved. And I'm going to share with you just a few of the things that are happening in this space to potentially keep your eye on and to ground ourselves in what we're doing. First, of course, is the returning to sport. The document I have up here is from the NCYS, which I know has informed and aggregated many of the return to sports documents from around the country. I have a collection of probably about 25 or 30 from different national governing bodies, Olympic groups, sport groups, as well as some internationals from Canada. There are many out there, and they're all kind of around the same thing, suggesting hygiene issues and movement of space and things of that nature. There is a movement towards sustainable sport and taking a hard look at how are we doing sport right now, being led by the Play Sports Coalition and by Project Play, the Aspen Institute's Project Play, with how do we think about this going forward, knowing that youth sport is going to take a very large hit. In some places, it's as much as 40% loss of funding and programming, particularly in some of our communities that need these things the most. And particularly hard hit will be many of the programs that tie to after school, inclusion, diversity, and opportunities for athletes' growth and development. Of course, we've got movement around the diversity and inclusion, which ties to the sustainable sport. And some of you have seen that graphic down at the bottom, the equality, equity, and justice, and making sure we're differentiating and taking a look at those things. And that's playing a very big role in these conversations about sustainable sport and how do we grow this going forward. And I also want to draw everybody's attention to two very important documents. The United States doesn't have a sports ministry. We don't have an overriding organization that provides guidance to us as many other countries do with sport ministries that deal with their Olympic sport through the entire society of sport and physical activity. What we do have is through the Department of Health and Human Services, we have the President's Council on Sport, Fitness, and Nutrition, which many of you may remember is that little badge that's up there that you earn in PE by either doing your pull-ups or your flexed arm hang and all the other things. And then we also have the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. And those two organizations have come out with the National Youth Sports Strategy. If you have not read that document and you are a league director and someone seeking funding for organizations, it's strongly recommended. It's on their website. I can also make it available. And then there's also healthypeople.gov, which is put out by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. It's not coming out till fall. It got pushed back by 6 months because of COVID. Healthy People 2020 was prior to that, and prior to that was Healthy People 2010, and all talking about initiatives for how do we use sport and physical activity to enhance our population. And I bring all of these up because they are really great opportunities for us to start thinking about how do we support community health and engagement and inclusion with what we do, knowing that NICA is so many things, and at the core of it is community and community health and well-being. And one of the most amazing things about the bike is that everyone can ride, right? So let's take a look at what it's going to be like as we move into summer and fall and further. I really don't like the conversation around back to normal because that sets people up for an expectation that won't happen. Instead, it's how are we growing into this new space? How are we using our new information? And how can we as leaders, and keeping in mind that we've got league directors, coach developers, coaches, parents, and if you're a student athlete on here, I would consider you a student leader if you're listening in and interested in this conversation bigger than your own bike riding. And how do we create these supportive, sustainable communities, right? So let's take just a quick tour of this. They only gave me 19 minutes. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that the NICA community has a number of tremendous strengths to celebrate, particularly as we consider the NICA Adventure Program, the NICA Team Trail Corps. All of these things are absolutely amazing opportunities to think about building communities, emphasizing engagement, quality and inclusion, and to really consider how you're spending your resources as a team, as a league, and as an athlete going into this fall, and how, knowing that we can't always go outwardly, we may not be able to go into different parts of the state and do different things, what can we do locally to really help grow this as much as possible right now and support the reemergence? So as we think about supporting our athletes, this is a great opportunity to start thinking about how do we build resilience? How do we have the conversations about resilience? We crash on the bike, we get back up. What are some of those conversations as leaders, as coaches, as team leaders from the athlete's perspective? How do we make sure we give athletes the voice to talk about these things and to talk about their concerns? Opportunities to develop leadership and let athletes help build into the place of bringing new people in and doing some of these things. And again, NICA's got some great materials around that we want to make sure we're reinforcing and using. It's also a great opportunity to really do some modeling behavior. How are you as an adult or you as a leader around the athletes talking about these things? And what's the message you're sending about being a part of a community and social responsibility and all of these things? Being very mindful of those things so you're giving athletes something to look to and they consider how they behave. And when we consider that, well, particularly the Black Lives Matter conversation, this is a time to do a lot of listening. Maybe pose a question and then back up and listen and let the athletes, let the people in your community talk. We want to make sure that we're giving plenty of opportunities to support the families as well. This is another amazing opportunity that's also very stressful. Families getting together, chances to ride together. How do we create opportunities within your smaller NICA families to bring families together and let them ride? Let them explore this idea. Looking for opportunities for inclusion and talking about ways that you might do this within your community. I think one of the most dangerous conversations right now is in how we sometimes language some of these things. And trying to make sure we don't create an us-them dynamic and focus more on a we. This is for everyone in our community. We invite you in to join us. And looking for opportunities to have those conversations and maybe looking outside of your NICA community to make sure that NICA is a part of whatever those communities are. So if you're a local team, how does your local team get involved in some of those other communities? As a great way to show, instead of just saying, come here to us, how do you go out and join some of those other things? And creating a community space is a really, really important piece here. And then I think something that perhaps we don't talk about enough is NICA is founded, and the backbone, as Susan said in the beginning, volunteers, people that are giving their time, people who are incredibly passionate. They're passionate about bikes, they're passionate about kids, they are passionate about helping make a difference. However, not everybody coming into that space has had the opportunity to be trained or to have the skills beyond the passion. And so this is the time to stop and really think about, how are we caring for our coaches? How are we making sure that there is a safe space for them to talk about their concerns? I've been running a lot of clinics right now with the coaches that I work with in different environments, and concerns around, is it my responsibility to keep my kids safe from COVID? How do I do that? What is my responsibility here? More recently, how do I make sure that my language and the way that I'm talking is inclusive? How do I reflect on my own behaviors in a way that is working well? And how can I ask to make sure that I'm doing those things? Because I don't want to ask the wrong question and I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so this is a moment to really take some time and to build those small communities and find smaller communities that you can have people have some conversations around. And giving a space for that, I think, is really, really important, in a space for the reflection and a safe space in which there's not the judgment around it. Very difficult. Also a time to really acknowledge encouraging listening skills. How do we help people get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations? Get uncomfortable hearing things that may challenge you to what they think or what they believe. Maybe challenging because it's stressful, maybe challenging because it hits on something that they believed or that they thought they knew about themselves. And so again, a very extra challenging thing to do in a volunteer environment and a volunteer community, but one that is very worthwhile when you think about that need for vulnerability and that need for conversation. And if you've never read into the work of Brene Brown in particular, I strongly recommend her TED Talks and some of her other materials as she talks about the power of vulnerability. It's probably one of the most impactful resources that I've, in talking to some of my student coaches, interns and folks that are out in the field, when we start talking about their skills as a coach, to get them to really get comfortable not being perfect and being a leader while not at the same time being totally responsible for being a perfect leader, and being able to engage in a stronger, more powerful way through that sense of vulnerability and learning and engagement. And so I strongly recommend that as well. And then one last thing I'd like to mention that I sort of skipped over on one of the earlier slides. A lot of the visuals and a lot of the excitement around NICA comes from the racing space. And the acknowledgement that for right now, that is not necessarily going to perhaps move as smoothly as we'd like it to in all the communities. And how can we help make sure that through all the other powerful things that NICA does, how do we help make sure that that's the icing on the cake, and that we really use all the power of NICA to build that underlying infrastructure, knowing that it may take a year or 2 years to really move back into a high performance, exciting, the drama of racing, all the great stuff that everybody loves. But as John was mentioning, there's so much more power to getting on a bike than just going for a finish line. And we have a tremendous amount of power to that. So knowing that I am running through my time and wanting to make sure that I don't infringe on the other pieces of this really powerful program, I wanted to thank everyone, provide my NICA email address if anyone has any questions or would like any resources, and thank NICA again for putting this together and providing an opportunity to have some of these conversations.
All right, thank you so much, Kristen. I really appreciate your words, and I think we've got a lot of coaches in attendance, and I may have a little bit of a bias here. I think coaches are so extremely important, and they're the ones that are eye to eye with our student athletes every day. So thank you, coaches, for being here. You're awesome, and we really care about you and respect what you do. All right, next up, we've got Lou Bergholz. And if anybody was in attendance at last year's national conference in Idaho, you'll no doubt remember Lou. Lou and his company, Edgework Consulting, have been working for over 20 years with teams, organizations, and communities to help them grow and pursue their best selves through boundary-pushing ideas, behaviors, strategies, and programs. I've had the pleasure of working with Lou over the last year, and I'm continually amazed at how he's able to clearly and concisely communicate how to help groups function better based on values, choices, and actions. Lou's presentation today is titled Pursuit of My Best Self, Character Building for the Entire NICA Community. All right, take it away, Lou.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm gonna get at it because I know time is short and I want to make the most of the opportunity here. So thank you to everyone at NICA National and everyone who's joining from around the country. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here. I'm here to talk about character. So let's start with a working definition, both from the NICA perspective and externally as well. If you ask from within and also kind of ask generally, what you often find that one of the more common definitions that we see is something to the effect of, what people do when no one is looking. And it's a good place to start. When we set out a year and a half ago to start to work formally with NICA, that was the first thing we did. Is we did some research and we looked around to figure out, so how are people really defining this at an academic level, how we teach it, how we apply it, and what we ended up with was something to the effect of an expression of beliefs and values that gets expressed through goals and choices. So beliefs and values plus goals plus choices. And developing your character, what's really special about it is it's not age dependent. It's a movement of growth and development from within. So a 10-year-old could have more evolved character in many ways than a 40-year-old. And we move on a continuum. And that continuum is, as I said, it's not age dependent. It's really based on, in a very simple way of thinking about moving from a state of compliance, where we do what we're told and what we're supposed to do, to some kind of state that's really built on conviction and commitment, where I make choices, I set goals, I do things because I care, because I believe in something, and because I want to. Hence this intersection of beliefs and values that drive goals that you set, aspirations that you have, and choices that you make as well. So why does character matter so much? It really matters for a host of reasons. What we found is that in youth development, good character development is really a subset, it's a part of good youth development. And youth development, by definition, is the process of preparing a young person to meet the challenges of adolescence and into young adulthood and adulthood, and hopefully achieve some version of their full potential. So character is a key part of that equation. I think it also matters particularly to your theme for this national conversation today. As you look into the future, instilling in your student athletes a deep conviction and a commitment to, among several things, like mountain biking, cycling for life, preserving the outdoors, pursuing goals, making consistent health-seeking choices. This is some of the deepest legacy that any youth program can leave behind. And I think if you instill a love for mountain biking in the outdoors, but we churn out riders that only think about themselves, that don't contribute to communities, and that make choices that may hurt themselves or others, then we will not have succeeded in what programming like yours is all about. Character also matters because deep inside every youth development program is a truly intense and intimate dialogue between you and a young person about who they are, what they stand for, who they want to be, and the truly hard work that it takes to get there. And you may not always have these conversations explicitly. The beauty of sport in particular is that the activity becomes truly part of the conversation. There is dialogue and play and movement and working together and competition. And so you may, as a coach or as someone else in NICA, be primarily riding and racing, but don't doubt that some version of those conversations are threading through the experience and happening. You are, and I think always have been, shaping character development for your student athletes, and really for everyone. And you're not just shaping their bike prowess. I think you'd be coaching somewhere else if it was really just about the bike. The bike, the training rides, the races, they're, from a youth development perspective, how I think about things, they're mediums and they're catalysts. And they're really good, but they're means towards other ends. So we're in an era of disruption. Disrupted work, disrupted school, travel, social interaction, our understanding of our country's history, a deep look at what equity and social justice, all this stuff really means. But what we're really looking at, I think, from a human development perspective, is actually disrupted development. And as a youth organization, we have to say yes to the challenge and also the opportunity to use your medium to serve your current community and those that you intend to include in ways that help everyone develop. So why does character matter? I think it matters because life gets hard. Some of us may not have known that in this way before this year, but it's true. I'm not saying it's always hard, but life has hardship. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And from the character standpoint, what's really special about that is that character is more often forged than taught. It's not easy to teach character in a classroom setting. It happens when we're tested. And I think in my limited exposure to NICA, which is about a year and a half, but I've had a chance to look pretty deeply inside what you do. I think you've built one of the best test platforms in youth sport. You have this truly powerful culture. You have this combination of some of the best elements of your sport of mountain biking. You have the backdrop and the ability to connect to the outdoors and nature. You have really embedded in many deep ways the concept of challenge by choice, the spectrum of choices that you allow and really invite your student athletes to make are much broader than in many other sports. There's no bench. You actually confront real risk and risk management and use it to help dialogue with student athletes about harm reduction and choices and stretch experiences. And for anyone, including young people, there's this space, and it lives at the intersection of what you believe, what you aim to achieve, and the choices you make. And we think of this space as the distinction between, at least how we think about character development, the space between what you should do and what you could do. So let me offer you a couple of quick examples. One of my best friends, her daughter, 14, 15 years old, recently called out her 16-year-old cousin for posting videos of himself driving his parents' car and subsequently getting it into an accident. And he posted these all on social media and then lied about what happened to the accident. And she told her mom, she went and told her cousin's parents, and she did this not because she wanted to get him into trouble. She did this because she loves him. And he subsequently turned around and really brutalized her on social media. And she stood by what she did because she was concerned about him. We've been working with the Maryland League this year to look at ways we can start to pilot some of this character development work in their league. And it's been a real pleasure working with lots of folks there, particularly John and Fred, the league directors. And John told a story a few months ago about going out the back of his house and getting on his trail and almost wrecking his bike as somebody had dug a brand new jump into a turn on this trail. And he rolled around the corner and then saw this father with his kids carrying these shovels down the trail. And was prepared to offer some choice words as he kind of rolled up on them, and took a moment to reset and opted for a different tactic, something to the effect of, hey, that was an amazing jump you just dug. Wonder about its placement, and opted for a different outcome there. And for many, if not everybody right now, all kinds of people, whether you have kids or not, it's about engaging in some really hard conversations right now, just from the pandemic perspective, about safety, participation, access, outcomes, funding, and all the other countless elements at play in thinking about bringing student athletes, teams, and leagues back into action. The space is rarely as simple as right versus wrong. But when you're in that space, amazing things happen. So I'll share a story for me that has always clarified to me what this space means. Between 2002 and 2010, I worked with several nonprofits in Southern Africa, all youth serving on HIV prevention. And around 2007, I was in Malawi, and we were doing some work with Baylor Hospital out of Texas, and they had built these incredible teen clubs for adolescents who were all HIV positive to try to navigate all the layers of challenge that they were confronting. And we had built this activity for them one day when they were gathering for their, I think it was a weekly teen club, and it was a talk show. And the talk show was intended to have teens as guests, as audience members, and try to open up this should versus could dialogue. It was a kind of a subtle way to get at some of the real challenges. And for that day, the topic was around disclosure. So I don't know how familiar everybody is or was with some of the real issues that especially at the peak of the HIV epidemic in Africa and around the world. Disclosure was a huge topic, right? The question is, who do you tell about your status, given the degrees of discrimination, potential threats of violence, isolation, stigma? But at the same time, all the public health research was saying that you can't do this alone, that you need people to know that what your status is so they can support you, and you have people to talk to. You should tell someone. But there's a lot of reasons not to. And so imagine being 16 years old, 14 years old, 13 years old, and having to make that decision. Should I tell? I want to tell. I know I need to tell. What will happen to me if I do? Will they still be my friends? Could they hurt me? So I've learned over the years that I do not have a strong sense of direction when I drive or travel or hike or bike, but I've very good situational awareness. And as all these teenagers kind of rolled into this building we had in this space, I was pretty good at reading the room, even with language barriers. And from the moment we settled in, I spotted this kid. He was the cool kid. He didn't sit in the chairs. He went to the side, sat down on the ground. He had like an entourage with him that all sat around him. He was just that balance of like distracted and distracting, but not enough that you could go and kind of intervene to figure out what to do. So you just had to kind of see it through. And we go, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes into this session, and it's good. There's some good conversations. People are sharing things, but we're still living on the should conversation, not the reality, kind of what could you do to solve for this really hard situation. And out of nowhere, he stands up and he grabs the microphone. And paraphrasing what he said was something to the effect of, and he was frustrated. He had something to say that he really wanted to share. He said, here's what I do. If there's someone I think is a friend and I want them to be on my team, I want to trust them with my secret. What I do is I tell them another secret. I don't tell them about my status. I tell them something else, maybe somebody I have a crush on, something else that's personal for me, but not the big secrets. And I wait, and he said, I wait 2 weeks. That was his number. And I see if the secret makes it around the school. And if the secret comes back to me, I know I cannot trust that person. If it doesn't, then I tell them another secret. Because and he said it takes 2 secrets to be sure. And if that secret goes 2 weeks and nobody tells and nobody finds out, then I know I can trust that person. This kid was making, I think, some of the smartest choices in really a difficult circumstance I've ever seen. Choosing friends with a more discerning eye than almost any teen I've ever met, and willing to share his trade secrets with this community as well. So why does character matter? It matters in the end because our student athletes are children. They go into the world, they set goals, and they make choices. And no matter how close we are, no matter how near we are to them in physical proximity, they still have to make their own choices. And when you ask student athletes, and this has been done to a small degree inside NICA, what character looks like, they talk about making friends and helping new people settle in, getting your bike across the finish line even if it's not functioning anymore, stopping, turning around and helping someone else repair their bike or find their way across a finish line at a race together. It's this tending and mending of trying to figure out how to do what's right, no matter what the rule book says you should or shouldn't do. So I really believe that at NICA, and what I've seen is that you create this space. You obsess over safety and risk management. Why? It's not just to avoid physical injury. It's because when things are that safe physically and you couple it with the coaching and the emotional space that you create, you provide opportunities for risk taking, for choices, for goal setting, and to live in between what you should do and what you could do. So character matters because if we choose to try to support its development, the place where we have the most impact is when we can earn our way into that space. To talk with a student athlete, with a young person, and explore beliefs, values, goals, and choices. Not just about riding or racing, but about life as well. And this space travels. Yes, I just said space travel. It's not really the bike or the trail, right? It's your ethos at NICA. It's your language, your dynamic. You know, I've had the pleasure of having calls with Fred and John in Maryland most of this year, with Amanda and Melissa and Mike from NICA National. Like, we've been in this design conversation for a long time. And truthfully, like genuinely, your conversations, that when I get to have these calls, they're just different. It's a little bit better, a little bit more caring, a little bit more intentional, a little bit more open, more authentic. That's your NICA space. So I think when we think about the future as the theme for this conversation today, it's understanding in the absence of program, you always have had and will have the space. And this space is where our best selves emerge. And if not your best self, which doesn't always happen on any given day, then doing your best. You have an environment where you can put these two ideas together, where you can go for best self, but we also acknowledge, value, and really celebrate the effort and doing our best as individuals as well. And I think you can apply that space in many parts of your life. Riding and racing have been disrupted dramatically in the past few months. And as Kristen said, like the road back is going to be, it's going to be a long road back to get where you were, but the point is not to go back, it's to go forward. And if we limit our definition of this space to only physical locations and events, then for sure, you're going to experience disruptions for a long time. But your NICA space is not physical, not only. You know, I think your future is in the investment in imagining what it means beyond just what you currently think about in terms of physicality. Of course, we have to get back to riding. We have to race, but how you preserve it, how you understand how it works, who you include in it, how you make it even more available, accessible, powerful, portable, and how you all benefit from it, not just your student athletes. And I truly believe that's part of your special power. At your core, the outcomes you achieve and you aspire to are for everyone. There's room for everyone in NICA to benefit and grow. You know, many sports, there's the cult of the coach, who supposedly is all-knowing, has achieved some state of optimal development and cannot be critiqued or given feedback, but can only tell and sort of direct people what to do and how to grow. That's not your ethos. We need this space right now. I think more than even we imagine sometimes. And so to think about what we can do, right? What do you want to do with this space? And not just getting it back to where it was physically, but to know that it carries on. We're creating it today. What tests are you facing right now for yourself? And you know, who can you invite in for help? The space is a place for everyone to benefit from. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and my wife and I, we attempted to parent in another location last week. On paper, it was supposed to be a vacation. It never really works out that way, especially with an 18-month-old and in pandemic life. But while we were in this other location, we got to chatting with somebody who lived in that neighborhood we're staying in, and he was a career soccer coach. Turns out 30 years coaching one of the more prominent high school teams, and I'm in Boston, in one of the greater kind of Boston area in the neighborhoods. And you know, they're talking about return to play. They're talking about preseason. And he told me that a father recently called, and that and the father has two daughters at high school age. I think it was a senior and a sophomore. And that because of COVID-19 and a bunch of factors that were kind of related to the pandemic, the family was not going to be around for them to attend all of the tryouts that were being scheduled for preseason. And this coach, turned to me very, very quickly and casually and said, the senior's going to be okay. She's played 4 years. She's a solid player. I know her. Like, she'll be fine on the team. But he actually then told the father that he couldn't really promise that the daughter would make the team if she couldn't attend all of the tryouts. So here we have a family going through their pandemic story. And because of circumstances out of their control, they have to solve for one daughter making a team, one daughter not. And honestly, it's absurd to me. Sports teams have tryouts and requirements, many of them. This is the should. But sports team post-pandemic or in the pandemic, who knows what they're supposed to have? Right? And wouldn't it be amazing if we actually thought about what those two girls need, what that family needs? And this is the should versus the could. Right? You should run your team the way it was and follow state rules and follow requirements, but you could do something totally different. A season of sport that unifies families, that helps siblings find their rhythm through play, that looks closely to see who needs what. Because maybe that 10th grader needs this team 10 times more than her older sister. So as you think about character development for all within NICA, and all being not just membership NICA, but everybody else that we're thinking of including and where we want the space we create to travel, I think there's a challenge and an opportunity in what your future holds. And that last question is a who question. It's in your local, and we'll start with team, but let's include community. And that theme has been referenced already. Who needs your space right now? You know how special the NICA experience is. And if we can decouple it from the bike only and the race only, and know that it's this other stuff too. And of course, the bike is the medium. It's why it's your sport and not other sports. But just holding on to that space for a minute. Right? Who needs it? What do they need? And how could we help them get it as individuals, as teams? We're all being tested in different ways right now. We've lost our places and activities in youth sports, but you always have your space, and it's strong. What do you do with it? How can you leverage it? And thinking about what we do as individuals, not just as teams and communities. I am a newcomer to NICA. I have still yet to, I got involved in 2019 and we were all set to head down to watch a race this spring, and the pandemic happened. I still have yet to see a race, but I've seen videos. And I've seen a lot of youth sports programs around the country and around the world. You have something special. And it's not just about convening to ride. There's some other amazing things happening. And it's an opportunity to think about the choices that we make, not just what we had before, but the opportunities to reimagine things and to do it with outcomes in mind. I've cherished the time that I've spent inside your community and your special NICA family over the past year and a half. And I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to join the conversation today. And I'm really excited for the future, whatever gets carved out nationally and regionally and locally. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lou. Always inspiring to hear you talk. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your perspective with what NICA can do. All right, up next, we've got, to close out the first ever NICA National Conversation, we've got NICA President Steve Matous. Steve's going to be speaking on NICA's vision for the future and how we can continue to positively impact student athletes, coaches, and families, and the communities that we serve. Steve's going to be answering a few of the questions that have been coming in after his presentations. Again, we won't have time kind of for all of them, but if you've got more questions for Steve, throw them in that Q&A section. Remember that we can see all of your questions come in as well. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. And we'll get a slide up here and then we'll get going. I just want to first and foremost say thank you for having me as the president, for allowing me to serve this community. It's an incredible community. One of the things that we've already heard from the three speakers that connects us all are the volunteers. There's over 11,000 of you. You're coaches, your core staff, you work in your communities to support the teams. You are the team managers. So I just want to acknowledge all of you and how important you are to what we do, who we are, and where we're headed. The three speakers themselves each made some points that I thought were pretty interesting. John, he reminded us that coaches are incredibly influential in our path to fulfillment. And I fully agree with the way he characterized NICA. We are definitely on the path to fulfillment. We may have victories along the way, but we're also going to have some failures. And then Kristen, she really focused on how we build communities. And that is, all of you know, far better than I, because many of you have been involved with us for many, many years. It's the community that makes NICA what it is. It's the support of the local bike shop. It's the coach who doesn't even have a student in the league. And I can tell you that that's almost a third of our coaches don't have students in the league. So we have a pretty strong community that's supporting us. And then finally, Lou, some of the things that he talked about resonated very clearly for me. How much character matters, how much racing, which is our lifeblood, and it's our venue, is only a part of the bigger story. How the communications between the coach and the student athlete and the parent and their peers and the other racers and the core staff, it's not just verbal. It is, in fact, being on the bike, changing a flat tire, whatever. It's very interesting how we use the outdoors and the physical activity to build tenacity, to build community. So first, before I get started, I just want to acknowledge our present. We had a very unfortunate incident on Sunday. One of our student athletes, on his way home from work, Sunday evening, riding his bike, working at the local Trek store as a mechanic, was killed, hit by a car. Unfortunately, stories like this have been fairly common this past year. We've lost student athletes, we've lost coaches, other people around the country. So I just want to take a couple of moments of silence here to acknowledge their passing. And for us all just to reflect for a minute on what we have and who we hold dear. What I also want to do, though, is look to the future. We do have a significant number of incredible coaches, athletes, students, sponsors, team managers, people that make NICA what it is today. If you have an opportunity, go to the national website, take a look at the NICA National Awards, take a look at those student athletes especially. A number of them have contacted me in the past weeks. They're engaged in, they're advocates dealing with the protests that are happening across our national spectrum right now. They are inventors. They are people that are getting ready to go to college. They're really, really incredible people, and they are our future. So I want to make sure to acknowledge them as well. One of the things that I know we all have is a real test of our character right now. As we can see, this is one of the things that we value much at NICA, but I know many of you who are on this webinar with us are facing economic challenges, you're facing health challenges, perhaps even worse due to the COVID virus. And then, of course, with the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota, it's really shared a spotlight on a long history of problems within our country. We also, as NICA, have to acknowledge that we are predominantly a sport of people who have money, who have access, and are mostly of one race. However, I don't want that to slow us down. I don't want that to change our commitment. The commitments that I was handed when I came on board, NICA was already very strongly involved in creating the future of a more diverse population. We had already been recruiting and looking at ways to increase the diversity of our female student athletes, of our female coaches. We started a program, we got it funded, we hired full-time staff. We need to do the same with our efforts around the greater pieces of diversity. And we will. We have made significant progress in efforts towards bringing people of color on our board. Unfortunately, one of those people who did start in January had some medical conditions that required him to move on. We have made significant inroads, and as one example, I'll use the state of Nebraska, the city of Omaha. We created partnerships with local foundations. North Shore Foundation, which works in the community of people of color, has a great relationship with Omaha North High School. We also partnered with IMBA, and the idea there was that, you know what, sometimes the issue, the barrier, the obstacle for people joining a NICA league isn't money, but in fact, it's transportation. The kids don't have the way to get to a practice after school. So IMBA is looking at building a short track right on the school grounds. Another program that we've been working on with QBP called the Gateway Project. It's in Pennsylvania, it's in Minnesota. Same idea. Let's build practice areas, tracks close to home. Let's put them on school properties. All of that allows access for kids to train, to be part of a team, to look forward to be part of who we are and what we do. The photo we see right here, that's kind of the idealized state of NICA and of mountain biking, what many of us think of when we think of mountain biking. But the reality is we need, and we will continue to, reach out into the urban areas. We need to reach out and understand what are the barriers, what prevents people of color from joining. Part of it is we don't have mentors in the coaching ranks. Part of it is we don't have people in high positions in our boards, in our leagues, in our national staff. We need to hire more. We've made all these commitments. We are going to follow through. We're having a lot of conversations right now. We have great support from our sponsors. There's money available to tackle this issue. And I just want to be very realistic here that the future of NICA really is best if it represents and reflects our community and the diversity in our community as a whole in the United States. I speak as a grandchild of immigrants. My grandparents didn't speak English. My father was the first person to go to college. While this is a very different experience than many of our people of color are challenged by, it's still a unique experience that led me to understand why the United States of America is so much better off because of its diversity, because of its inclusive nature, and because of us all getting together. So what else about the future? Where are we headed? Well, if you look at this photo on the screen right now, it looks pretty busy. Guess what? 10 years from now, we're going to have 250,000 students. We're going to have 50,000 coaches and volunteers. We're going to be in all 50 states. I already have more people knocking on the door than I can possibly answer who want to start teams, leagues, NICA chapters, and spread the word, not only in the US. Interestingly enough, I've had inquiries from 4 foreign countries multiple times. The NICA mission, the NICA process is well known and people want it. More than ever, NICA is needed. More than ever in the future will be needed as well. But right now, given our challenges economically, health-wise, there is a significant need to get outside, get on your bike, have some physical activity, be with your peers, with your friends, face those challenges. So how are we going to do this moving forward? Well, one of the things that is already happening is we're being limited. The government and public health agencies they're saying to us, NICA, guess what? We love you, but the most people that can be in one place at one time in Maryland is 10. In Colorado, it's 25. In other places, it's more. It looks like on the horizon that Georgia may allow people to gather with up to 500 in an open outside setting for a sporting activity. But you know what? I went to a race in Utah last fall where we had 5,000 people at the weekend-long event, camping, getting together as community, sharing stories, practicing, challenging, having fun. I don't know that we're going to be able to do that in the near term. So what can we do? Well, one of the things we can do is practice what we preach. We talk about being advocates, Teen Trail Corps. Our kids can step up and let their communities know that they're going to be responsible, that they're going to help maintain these trails, and that why these trails are so important to them and the community as a whole. We have adventure rides where people don't have to race. And again, it's interesting, 15% of our student population nationwide never participates in a race event. But nobody sits on the bench. If they want to be part of what we do and be included in our process, they can. We are looking into how we continue to support our coaches. We can't train in person, although we hope to shortly. So we pivoted really strongly to a point where we have online trainings, online seminars. We've worked with partners to extend certifications. First aid is a classic example. We're doing everything we can to make sure that the coaches, the teams, the leagues are supported. And that means we've reached out to you in the community. We reached out to our sponsors, and they've all stuck with us. I can tell you why we may not have as much earned income right now from memberships and coach licenses and those sorts of things. Our sponsors have all stepped up, and they are allowing us very, very well to proceed into the future. So beyond those big numbers that I mentioned, which are daunting, I mean, when I think about that, NICA as an organization currently exists exclusively, and I'm very clear on this, exclusively because we have 11,000 volunteers across coaches and staffing and everything that we do. Think about 50,000 people. Wow. Where do we find those people? Well, we find them in their communities. We find them from you. We find them because we increase our outreach and our diversity of who we serve. We find them because there is not only a need, there is a demand. Anybody who's looked out in the parks, anybody who's tried to go to Target, Walmart, any retailer, any bike shop, anywhere, knows that it's almost impossible to buy a bike at the moment. It's almost impossible to get a trail by yourself. Even on the roads, as cars have come back, people are still riding. Communities have shut down streets to allow pedestrian and cycling traffic only. There is a huge demand. There's a huge need. We are going to have to march into the future together and figure out how to address that and honor that and support that. I need your help. I'm not going to do this on my own. The 60 staff that are employed across NICA nationwide can't do it. The 12,000 volunteers can't do it. We need all of you. So my challenge to all of you is, apart from the Q&A that's going to come up here in just a minute, and I'll answer as best I can the questions that you have in mind at the moment, help me figure out what tomorrow's going to be. Help me decide what the future of NICA and your team and your league is. Yes, we have some ideas. We can pivot in terms of training. We can do more things online. In some ways, it's funny. This is a welcome opportunity. I'm speaking to probably 2 to 3 times as many people as I would have had we had a conference in person in Philadelphia. So wow, there's some good that comes out of this. But we also need to get back and have those touch points in person. And we will do that. We'll do that in small groups as much as we can. We'll make sure that we accommodate the local needs, because the states are all different. But with having said all that, again, I want to invite you to join us, to help us carve what that future is. Know that it'll be bright. Know that we will be here. Know that we have the funding we need. We have the support. We have the passion. We have the interest. We have the will. Let's make it happen. So Mike, throw those questions at me.
All right, Steve. You know what? A lot of the questions that are coming in, you did a great job of answering in there. But we grabbed a couple that I think um, could use some more expanding. So one question that came in for you, Steve, from a NICA coach was, how is NICA supporting their coaches with dealing with the pandemic and being sensitive to racial inequities?
Well, there's two pieces to that, Mike. In the first part, I alluded to briefly around reaching out to partner organizations to help extend certifications. Background checks as another example. As a youth serving organization, we owe it to our parents and our students to do everything we can to protect them. And as the coaches know, one of the things we require is a criminal background check to make sure that we don't have any inappropriate people working directly with student athletes. While that will remain intact and enforced, what we've realized is that we have many coaches that are also teachers, they're firefighters, they're people that undergo these same background checks all the time. And if they are current as of last year, we're going to extend that until we're sure that they can get through that process again. The reason some people are being slowed in that process is because the local court systems are closed or so backlogged they can't keep up from having been closed during the COVID crisis the last few months. So we're extending that right now for a limited time until we know that we can catch up. Another example is, again, the online trainings. People like Mike, who you just heard speak, have done an incredible job of pivoting to take what normally would be done in person, on ground, with maybe as many as 30 or 40 people, and he's now presenting to several hundred online. So in some ways, again, we're reaching a greater audience. No, we don't have the tactical hand-on experience, and that's unfortunate. But at least we're connecting and we're getting the trainings done to make sure that the coaches are ready to go, to make sure they have the support that they need. Lou talked about the character development training curriculum that we've been working on. That's another thing that is so important to the work that the coaches do to help support them and make sure that they have the tools that they need to understand how to facilitate, how to listen, how to let the bike speak for itself sometimes. As Lou said, the conversation is not always verbal. And then moving on to the racial piece. Elephant in the room at the moment. We are 90% white in NICA. I want to be real clear. I know the statistics. Our student athletes tell us as an option. They don't have to tell us who they are, but they do. And over 90% of them have told us. So we have a pretty good handle on who's part of NICA. Just as I mentioned with the GRIT program, where we took a specific focus and said, okay, this is really important. We need to make this happen. We're going to take specific steps. We're going to hire people. We're going to get funding. We're going to roll this out. We're going to get the support from the leagues. We're going to engage the coaches. We're going to figure out how to do this right. We don't have all the answers. We're doing the same thing right now. I foresee a similar program rolling forward that'll be focused on people of color and very specifically looking to get it funded, to hire people to help us, to create education and training, to help me ask the correct questions. I don't know it all. I grew up in New York City. Sure, I grew up in a very diverse community. I grew up in a cement playground at my public school. I understand some of the issues, but there's much I don't get. I didn't have to experience the challenges that many people of color experience. So I need help in this. And we are very active in our outreach, very active in our approach to people who are of color, to people who work in these communities. I'm fortunate to have several people on my national staff who are people of color, who have had these experiences and are helping guide me. But that's the short answer. It's a big deal here. It's going to take us months and years, but we have the will and we're going to create the way.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. We got another one here from a student athlete who's asking kind of how NICA student athletes have been reacting during these times and just kind of how they're doing. And I'm sure you're hearing from some student athletes and from league directors. So what have you heard from student athletes about how they're reacting?
Yeah, certainly have. And the good news is that I'm readily available so people can find me easily via email or phone because that's all public information. And the students are pent up with energy. They're anxious and want to get back to their teams. Some of them want to get back to racing. All of them want to get back to riding. Many of them have expressed concerns about loss And by loss, I mean the example, I can't remember, one of our speakers talked about how seniors in high school didn't have the opportunity to say so long to their friends. Literally, I had one of our student athletes contact me and said, Steve, I went on spring break, and when I came back, NICA was shut down, my school was shut down, I can't talk to my friends, I don't know if I'll ever get to say so long, and that's a real sense of loss. Others, as I mentioned earlier, have reached out and said, you know what? I'm going to college. I need to figure out how to pay for it. I created this amazing tool that other students use. I want to share it. Will you help me share it across NICA? And so we put some information in one of our newsletters to help that student athlete, give them a leg up, because that's what they all need right now. They need that extra support. They need our interest. They need our engagement. And we welcome it. Back to you, Mike, because I know we're getting close on time, but certainly willing to answer your questions.
Yeah, this is, well, we'll probably kind of have this be your last kind of question here, Steve. And this one comes from a NICA parent. And we've talked about it a little bit, but maybe just expand if you've got anything else to add. But how will the structure of NICA nationally, at the league level, at the team level, need to evolve to ensure we continue to move towards our awesome goals that have been outlined today?
One of the first and foremost things we need to do is find a way to bring more mountain bike trails and tracks closer to home. So those programs that I mentioned with the Gateway Project, with IMBA, building tracks on school grounds where possible. We need to be more closely tied to urban areas. There's some incredible trail systems in Philadelphia, for example, over 46 miles of trails. Yet my guess is many of the people that live in Philadelphia don't even realize they're there. But that's where our population centers are, right? 80% of America lives in urban areas. So NICA, while this slide on the screen is classic again of what we think of when we think about mountain biking, we really need to think about cycling close to home. What does that mean? How do we do that? We also need to think about supporting more teams. We have 1,100 teams at the moment across the nation in NICA. We're going to need lots more teams, because if the pandemic lasts, or if other issues come up that prevent us from having our larger events, we're having even, a team of 100, and we have teams of that size, they can't all participate together. So we have to figure out how to accommodate that. How do we shrink our size, but still engage all those people actively? So that means we really have to step up at a national level and a league level, our support of the coaches, our training, our education, our funding. I know that we partner, as one example, with the Outright Foundation, which used to be the Specialized Foundation, specifically helping them access our teams. And they have a program where they match funding for the teams. If the team raises $5,000, they match it with $5,000. Incredible program. I know a number of our teams have had access to that, and we'll figure out how to get that information out there further. But again, that will help all of you. So that's a role that we at National can take, is to create those partnerships, make those connections, and roll them out locally so that you can pursue them.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks. I think just for interest of time here, that will have been our last question. So.
Thanks very much, Mike. It was great to be here, and thank everyone that's been on the call with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.